Welcome back to Lesson 10, Part 2. So we've set up our checkout page, and now we need to get into the guts of integrating with our Stripe payment gateway. Okay, so I've already posted the link to register at the Stripe dashboard, and we may want to I think we should open up the documentation here. So Stripe gives us documents about integrating their checkout process, and they've got documentation supporting a number of different languages and platforms. So we've got different docs, whether our front is HTML, React, or Next, and then different code libraries in the back end, 7 different libraries. Obviously, we're interested in the .NET library. So they've given us a sample, which sometimes we can copy and paste. I've found they've given us like a C# sample here of creating a checkout session. It's got most of what we need, but not everything we need. Okay, so we'll sort of go through this process, but we're going to have to modify it a little bit. The other thing we're going to need before we get into the coding piece is we're going to need to get our API keys from the Stripe dashboard. Okay, so we already should be familiar with this from doing your Facebook integration from your lab, doing our Google sign-in integration. In order for our .NET app to be able to use those services, we had to generate API keys in the Google Developer Console or the Facebook Developer Portal. We had to include those keys and read them in our application. Well, working with a payment service is no different. It needs to know who we are and which application is trying to access their service. So in a new browser tab, first, we're going to need to go to the Stripe dashboard. So sign in at dashboard.stripe.com. So Stripe is just one of many online payment services. It's probably one of the most popular ones in the world, and I find it's from a developer point of view, their documentation is quite good and the integration is quite easy. You might be tasked in a real project with using a different payment gateway, something like Moneris is a popular Canadian one, Authorize.net. If your customer does their business banking with TD Bank, they have their own payment gateway called Beanstream. But largely every integration, it's a little bit different, but the general process is similar. So the first thing you need to do in here is you need to create a store in your Stripe dashboard. I've already got one here. But you just click on New Account and give it a name. So you can call it, COMP2084 or Positive Pets. Doesn't really matter. You can call the store whatever you like. So go ahead and put in a name and click Create Account. And obviously, we'll leave the country of operation as Canada. I'm just going to use the existing store that I've already got here. So one of the nice things about using Stripe is it comes with 2 modes, much like your Facebook or our Google API. It's got a development mode or a test mode, and then an active or a production mode. So when we're in test mode, which is the default, we can send through all kinds of payment transactions, and we don't actually have to pay. No real credit card is getting charged. No real money is being exchanged. So we should see here that we're in test mode. And then over on the right, we've got this link here that says developers. So we want to click this developers link. So it's got like a checklist here to go through to activate your account. And over on the left, we've got a link to our API keys. Now, Stripe has changed their API several times. I think we're on version 3. And kind of like the other API keys we're used to, usually it's in a pair, kind of a public and a private key, which Stripe calls publishable key and secret key. In the latest version, it looks like I don't even think we need this publishable key. We really only need the secret key. So my publishable key is visible, so it starts with PK, and because we're in test mode, it's _test. The secret key is hidden, but I've got a button here that says reveal test key. So I'm going to click on that. And now I can just click on my secret key. So it starts with the prefix sk underscore test underscore. And your secret key will as well. So click on that to copy it. And then we want to dump this into our app settings.json. So down here at the bottom, I'm going to add a comma and a section for Stripe. And then I'll create a JSON value called secret key and paste it in. I said, I don't think we'll need the publishable key anymore. In fact, what we may even do, I'm going to keep it in app settings.json, but to make our code simpler, we're also, for starters, we'll even just paste this value right into our C#. And then later, if we have time, we'll read it out of the config file, which is the more correct way to do it, but it involves some kind of tricks to get there. So now I'll go back to the documentation. It says step 1, install the stripe.net library. So I'm going to go back to my project. I'm going to go to Tools and the NuGet Package Manager. And I want to manage the NuGet packages for solution. I'll click on Browse. I'm going to search for Stripe. So what we want is stripe.net, version 3979. This is the official library for Stripe. So I'll just click on my project and install it. It's not a big library. Just say OK. And so now I get a green check mark here telling me that we have now installed this package. I'm going to build my solution, recompile now that we've got access to Stripe. And then we can go back to the docs, see what's next. So it wants us to add an endpoint on our server that creates a checkout session. Now, they've given us a lot of the code here. There's a sample here that says server.cs with some code to create a new line item. And then we set up a payment mode. And then we set up kind of like our redirect URIs in the Google and Facebook panel, but we've got a success and a cancel URL. So where does Stripe send the user if the payment's successful? Where does Stripe send them if they cancel the payment? And then it creates a new Stripe session and we'll redirect the user there. Now, I tried this code in my Tuesday class. It actually isn't quite complete for what we need. So I've put a modified version of this up on Blackboard instead. So first, let's go back to our shop controller. First, we actually need a simple payment method in view to invoke this. Get shop / payment. Again, we'll call authorize. So we'll have a payment page that simply returns a view. We're now going to just create an empty view called payment. I'll add a view. This time, we're just going to pick empty. It's going to be a really simple page. We'll call it payment. And there's a couple things here we need to add. They've actually given us a bit of a sample right here. So they've given us this little checkout page like this. And there's a tab here. There's a couple of elements here that we want. We really only need lines, I want lines 6 and 7. The two JavaScript links here we're going to take. So I'm going to copy those two links to the clipboard. I'll also put them in the chat. Yep, empty razor view. I'm going to put those two links up at the top. And then we'll build a really simple form. Our method of post and our action will be /shop/ create checkout session. And then we'll just put a button in here to invoke it. I'll just maybe have it say next. Or maybe I'll say continue to payment. I know this form seems like a little bit pointless, like why just give them a button, but we need it in order to start invoking the call to Stripe. So all we're going to get is a button on here. So then we're going to create a post method called create checkout session. And we're going to use, like I think I mentioned, a modified version of the code in the Stripe docs. The code they gave us isn't exactly what we need. It's close, but not exactly. So I'm going to go back here, and then we can add our post shop create checkout session. Again, we'll use authorize. And this time it's HTTP post. So this is where we're actually going to implement the code to try and create a payment on Stripe and then receive the response back. So there's this server.cs file here, I said, with a post method here. It's got a bunch of code. I've put a modified version of this code up on Blackboard. So let's copy it. I've given you the Stripe checkout code. It's not complete. We're going to have to add a few things above it. But we'll grab it and we'll paste that in. And we'll get a bunch of errors. So this is about 80% the same as the code that's in their documentation. But I've made some changes and we'll add some comments and notes through here. So notice here on line 173, I'm setting the amount and I'm setting it to the order, right? Our order doesn't exist yet. We're going to have to get our order variable, read it back out of the session object. So remember when we hit checkout, we use the extension to save the order, save a session variable. We've now got to retrieve that session variable to figure out how much it costs. So get order from session var. So we're going to call get object this time. And we need to pass in the type. What kind of object is this? We're creating an order object from our session variable called order. So now the reference to order is fixed. I think I just have to change this property. It's not called total. It's called order total. So I'm going to change this line where I'm setting the amount of the purchase. So the errors on this line go away now. Once we declare what order is, and I just needed to update that from total to order total. The charges in Stripe also, notice I'm multiplying it by 100. Why do you suppose that might be? So if our order total was $50, why would we be setting the amount as 5,000? You had to guess. That's right, Tushar. So the Stripe checkout, it wants the amount of the charge in cents. Doesn't want a decimal number, it wants a whole number. So we'll have to multiply the cost by 100 to get rid of the decimal. Okay. Yep, so we need that. We need to set Stripe secret key. Now, normally we'd read it, we put it in appsettings.json. Just for now, for simplicity, I'm just going to hard code it in here. If we have time to change it later, we'll change it. So we set our Stripe configuration.api key equal to, and I'm just going to go and grab that value again that I put in appsettings.json. I'll just copy it. So it's going to start with skTest. So this isn't good practice. We should be reading it from the app settings file, but we'll have to do a bunch of other things. And we're already dealing with a whole bunch of new and confusing code. So for the moment, we'll just kind of do this quick and dirty. Stripe configuration doesn't exist. So it wants us to make a reference to Stripe. I'm actually going to pick this option down at the bottom. So it now adds a reference to the Stripe library at the top. So that solves one problem. You notice Stripe configuration turns blue. My red underline goes away. It actually created a problem here. So this line, before I added that reference, this line was fine, and this one was showing an error. So I fixed one problem by adding the Stripe reference. What does this message mean? Order is an ambiguous reference between positivepets.models.order and stripe.order. We haven't seen this error before, but it's fairly descriptive. What do you think's happening here? You're close to, Shar. Yes. So there's a conflict between our order model, not the session. So there are two classes now. Now that we added the Stripe reference, there's two order classes. Yeah. There's our own order class. And what's the other order class? Where does it come from? There's our own model. And if you look at the end of that message in gray, it says there's also an order class in the Stripe library. So now there's two classes called order. And when we're creating our order variable, it doesn't know which one is it. Is this a Stripe order? Or is it our own order class? So this is our own order class. So I'm going to have to change that to say models.order now. Because when we add that reference, we've now got two classes in the project with the same name. So we need to specify which one. So by changing this to models.order, we've now specified which order class we mean here. We've also got a bunch of errors in objects when we're trying to create a new Stripe session, right? So the options, the line item price, and line item price product, all of these are in the Stripe checkout. So we're going to need to make a reference to Stripe checkout here. It should clear up all four of the errors we see now.
Hello.
Yes.
So about Stripe configuration, I got a lot of options. Should I generate a property, field, read-only, local, parameter class, or nested class?
None. It should go all the way down to the bottom and make the choose using Stripe, which would appear down at the bottom. If you don't see that option, you can just scroll right to the top of your controller and you can just add in the reference. I'll put it in the chat. You can just put in using Stripe. You can make the reference manually if the code hinting doesn't give you that option. So I'm also going to add a reference using stripe.checkout. Boom. We no longer have any errors. So this code it's a modified from stripe.net docs. So I'll just you can probably infer what's happening with most of this, but we can just walk through it. We're creating a new session. And then the Stripe payment, it allows us to supply the line items. Now, rather than supplying each individual pet that's being purchased, we're just going to pay for the purchase as a whole. So I set up one line item. So the amount is equal to our order total in cents. Okay, because our unit amount is a long integer. It doesn't support decimal numbers. We've set the currency. And then on the product data, I'm just hard coding in. So this is what it will say, like on the customer's credit card charge or receipt. They'll know that the purchase was from our store. We're just going to hard code the quantity as 1. The payment method types, well, that's self-explanatory. We're only taking credit cards. Our mode is payment, as opposed to like a return or a credit note. And then we've got a success URL. So when this method gets called, it's going to take the user off to Stripe. And if they pay successfully, when they come back to our site, we're going to go to /shop, and we're going to create a method called save order that will then actually save the order to the database and do a few other things. And I'm using request.host. So the nice thing is this makes the domain dynamic. Rather than hard coding in localhost or my Azure or Smarter ASP domain, it just reads the current domain. So it will work. It will work whether doesn't matter what server or host I'm using. And if the user clicks cancel on the Stripe payment page, we'll just take them back. They'll come back to our site and go back to their shopping cart. Maybe they decide, I don't really have this much money. I don't want to pay this much. So I want to go back to my cart and, let's say, remove an item from the cart. So it will create a new Stripe session and redirect to either our success or cancel URL. So this is not advised to just hard code our key in here like this. It's a bit of a cheat for now. If we have time to clean this up after, we will clean it up. So I'm going to try to build. And now we get the same error about order being ambiguous. So we fixed it here. Yeah, that's right. But it's also telling us, thanks Tushar, if I go back to my output window, if I just click on this, double click, it now says in the checkout, we've now got the same problem, right? We're trying to bind these fields to an order, but we have the same error. The .NET compiler doesn't know which order class is it. So again, I'm going to change this to models.order, exactly as Tushar was suggesting. So we got that ambiguous reference twice in this class now. Now I should be able to build. Okay. So now we should be able to try this out and see if we get taken to the Stripe payment page. And if we do, we should be able to try a payment. If it all works successfully, when we're done on the Stripe site, we're going to get redirected to our site, to shop/save order, where we will expect to get a blank screen because we don't have that method yet. So let's start this up. Cart. My items are persisting because I'm shopping while I'm logged in. So $15.99 is the cost. I'll fill out my checkout form. I'll just click my continue button. And it now invokes, and notice it says test. It's got my store name here. It says test mode. Right, where we've coded in the description of our purchase. It shows up here. So that's coming from this line right here. And it shows the correct value. So now I can go ahead and try to put in a payment. And if I check the Stripe docs for testing, it gives us a whole bunch of test card numbers that you can use. So if you want to test with a Visa, you just alternate 4s and 2s. You can use any future expiry, any card verification. If you want to test with a MasterCard, you can use this card number. So I'm going to go back. So I'll try their test MasterCard. Now notice, if I don't follow it, it says invalid card number. If it's 12 5s and 4 4s, yeah, it's good. I can put in any values here. So now I'm going to try this purchase. Pay. It disables the button, so I can't click it twice. And it redirects me to save order, which suggests this all worked. Now, if I jump back to my Stripe dashboard and go to payments, we can see my transaction immediately. Here's my amount, my payment code, it's got the customer, and if I click on it, right, it will give us a whole pile of information. So it's got my positive pets purchase with quantity 1. It's got the info I filled out, my postal code, name, and email. Stripe would take a processing fee. Okay, so they don't do this for free. They give you the service, but they're going to take some of that, and all the payment services are going to do this. They also, they check the zip, they check the card verification code, they do a fraud score analysis, they log our IP. They can process a refund, or we can add notes here. So we get lots of information about our customers and their purchases in the panel. So now we got back down here where now we could start to save the order. Okay, so Tushar, which line of code is that for you? I don't know if your line 173 is the same as mine. For me, this is where we're starting to create the checkout session. I don't know if that's the same line for you or not. Okay, is session checkout create options, is that blue? Do you have this reference to stripe.checkout? You may have made the reference to stripe.billing instead.
No, it's stripe.checkout.
Okay. And you've got your key set up here?
Yes. Stripe configure.api key. Yes.
I may have to look at it after. So,
Okay.
and it builds properly, or it doesn't build?
It build, but when I click on proceed to pay, when error show then error show.
Okay, and in your payment page, you've got the reference to these two JavaScripts?
Yes.
Okay, I will have to maybe look at it after. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Sounds like you've done everything correct, so I don't know. Make sure, so maybe also build your solution, make sure that it's compiled.
Okay, I will try it.
So build and see if it says build succeeded, or if it says build succeeded, then you can go try it again in your browser. Okay, so I think we do have time now. This is not ideal. We should be reading this from our site configuration. Unfortunately, in .NET Core, the controllers don't have direct access to our app settings.json. Microsoft removed this in version 3 because they were trying to make the controllers more lightweight. But when we need the config values, this becomes a little bit of a pain. So we're going to make a couple of changes here. I'm going to scroll up to the top of my controller. And we're going to modify this section here. So our controller right now already has one dependency. Every time we use this controller, it gets passed a database connection object, an application DB context. We also now need to pass it a configuration object, because the configuration object, it can access appsettings.json, so we can read these values. So we're going to add a config instance to read vals from appsettings.json needed to access Stripe payment key. Okay, that's good, too sharp. So we're going to create a variable of type I configuration. Whoops. This class is not going to be recognized, so we're going to need to make a reference to the Microsoft Extensions configuration library. I know this is a pain. We're going to have to write about 10 lines of code just so that we don't have to hard code the API key into our controller. So we're going to declare it. Oops. In the same way we expose our database connection, so it's visible through in all the methods, we have to do the same thing with our configuration. Okay, so this technique is called dependency injection. It's where one object requires another object in order to do its job. So initially, our controller required a database connection in order to do its job. It now also requires, this controller also requires a configuration object so that we can read variables from app settings. So then we can use our configuration variable in our create checkout session. We don't want to hard code the API key in our C#. That's terrible practice. We can read it from the configuration instead. Okay, so I'll leave this code up for a minute. So I've added declared the configuration at the class level, added the dependency here, and then set the value at the class level here. In a minute, we'll scroll back down to our create checkout session, and we're going to replace that hard-coded string. We can use this I configuration variable instead to read the key from app settings. We also have to do a little bit of work in the startup file to get this to work. Scroll all the way back down. I'm not going to hard code this string anymore. So now we're going to call get section. So we're replacing that hard-coded value here. I'm going to try the code like this. I don't expect it's going to work yet. Okay. I will try to invoke Stripe again now, but it's probably going to tell us that this API key is empty. or needs to be set. We'll get some kind of error. We'll need one or two more lines in our startup file, I think, in order to get this to work. But I'll try it just for demo purposes. It's okay if we see the effects of writing our code this way. I'm going to try to make another purchase. We also will have to clear out the cart. Check out. Okay, interesting. It took us here, but let's see what happens when I actually try to finish this. Let's see. Okay. I didn't quite expect that. Let's see if my payment's actually there. Okay. It even shows my location. I gotta run that with my debugger. I'm surprised. I didn't expect that was gonna work. Let's see if it actually, I'm curious whether my API key gets populated this way. I didn't think it would. I'm gonna activate my debugger to see. Weird. Okay, let me remove that. Okay, so now it goes into create checkout session, grabs my order, right? So my API key is null. Oh, okay, I guess it worked this way. All right, great. That makes it even simpler. Okay, so it can read directly. It's got my key. I didn't think it could access app settings.json, but I guess I was wrong. Good. So now if I just click cancel on my purchase, right, it brings me back to the cart. Okay, well, a little less code than I thought we needed. Good. Stop my debugger. So we're actually done with the Stripe integration. Our process was create an account, generate a set of API keys, add the secret key. We didn't even need the publishable key. Add it to our app settings.json. Add our configuration dependency just to our shop controller. And then we've created a Stripe checkout session using our API key, figuring out how much the total is. converting it to cents, setting up our currency, the name of our, that should appear on the payment page, and then setting up our success and cancel URLs. So most of this code I've copied straight from the Stripe documentation, but when I tested it, I had to change a few things. So they don't have the price, they have a price ID. They want us like to set all our products up in the store and put our pricing there. Well, we don't want to do that. That's way too much work. So I've modified this a little bit so it will work for us. Does anybody have any questions about the payment part of the process? I know it's new. That's what happens when we work with APIs. They're always new. So we have to read the docs, try the sample code we get, and then we may have to adjust it.
I have one question, like
Sure.
not related to this. We use price like here, like order.total. Is that possible? Someone can change while doing payment using going inspect element or doing something like that?
Good. That's an excellent question. No, because remember, this value is not coming from the form. We are getting it from this. We're reading the order from our session variable, and we're setting it in code. So there's no way for a user to change this.
Okay, thank you.
Right. And also on our checkout page, originally we scaffolded, yes, there was an input for total, but we've removed that input entirely. Right. It's all calculated in our code. So the user cannot modify that price in any way. Good question, Tushar. Okay, I'm going to upload the latest changes. So this is our payment complete with Stripe. Okay, so I've uploaded to GitHub. So what we want to do in our last part of class when we come back is we're going to need to build the save order method that will then again fetch our order from the session, save it to the database, save all of the items along with the order. We'll need to do a few other things, and then we're going to scaffold an orders controller so that we can build an order history and order details. We want to show the user a confirmation page like a receipt. And we also want to let them see a history of all of their orders where they can then click and look in at any order that is theirs. And administrators would also have access to the same pages, but the administrator would obviously be able to see everybody's orders. So we're going to use scaffolding to generate a couple of views, and then we'll have to customize them a little bit in order to complete the solution. Okay, let's take a 10-minute break. Here, everything we've done so far is up on GitHub if you need to reference any of it. Okay, we'll be back shortly.